Welcome to the channel. This is going to be my opinion slash review of Star Trek Starfleet Academy episode 10, the last episode of the first season, where you think usually you tie everything up. Okay. Um, my thoughts on this episode is that it wasn't horrible, but it was disappointing. It was boring because it's just all talking, everybody talking to each other, everybody expressing feelings and whatever. Just too much. I mean, the episode 9 ended with the saucer section had broken away from the Athena's cells, the big wingy things that make no sense and look really stupid. But those parts were captured by the bad guys because earlier on in the first episode, I think they were trying to get the cells and warp drives and stuff. So it makes sense that they would maybe grab them. Anyways, then the saucer section was hiding in some clouds and sending out messages to any Starfleet vessels outside. But there was this big spherical. I'm assuming it was supposed to be spherical uh, minefield around the entire Federation. I was watching. Oh, sorry. Uh, I was watching another creator, and he did a thing with Chat GPT where he took some measurements that he'd gotten from older Star Trek about how big the Federation was, and it was massive, like thousands of light years. Anyways, he asked Chat GTP, which to me says that Chat GTP is a nerd because it knew a lot about Starfleet and Star Trek. Anyways, giving his dimensions, he was asking how many mines it would take to create a minefield um, big enough to encompass the Federation. And it was like, it wasn't billions, millions, billions, trillions. It was like gazillions of these mines, which made no sense that this faction would be able to produce them. Even if they were self-replicating, it would still take 100 years for them to produce enough through self-replication. So that part of it, and I think most people suspected that was bullshit. Somebody who did the writing doesn't understand science at all, or math, or whatever. So, anyways, that was just an interesting side thing from Little Platoon, I think his name is. Anyways, okay, so then we got the 10th episode, and that's everything's got to wrap up at the end of this season one. So we have Caleb's mother on the ship because she was injured, and the doctor actually saves her. But of course, she still sits there glancing daggers at the barefoot Contessa because of being put in a rehabilitation facility. It's emphasized more than once in the show that that's what it was. Not they don't say it's not a prison, but they say it was a rehabilitation. So it wasn't a prison, like a lot of other episodes claimed. It was a rehabilitation center because she killed somebody through her actions, and you find out more about the guy that was killed later in the show and kind of the dorky way that they're doing it. But anyways, um, so they're on the ship. Everybody's there. Um, they're trying to figure a way to do something with the minefield, and they realize that they're being hunted down by the baddies. So they tell all the kids to go hide in the airlock. So there was a thing in episode 9 where the Gaiden, the Klingon, and the Betazoid were ever able to mask their life signs by increasing the pressure in an airlock and being inside that. So they decide they're going to do that again to hide all the kiddies there. And then the baddie, Paul Giamatti, and his crew show up. They take Barefoot Contessa and Caleb's mom away, leaving Tig Notaro on the ship on her own, apparently, because they say, oh, no one else is here. Oh, and the doctor, the holographic doctor. Um, so then they say something to the doctor, who immediately recognizes it as some other stupid quote or something like that. So he pulls out his shout out to old Voyager, pulls out his mobile emitter and uses it to basically they create a holograph of the saucer section, and the bad guys shoot at it, and the hologram explodes. So they bad guys think they've destroyed the saucer section, which they didn't, because it miraculously comes out unscathed, which again makes very little sense given that the ship is in a certain position. They do the holograph. The bad guys shoot at the position of the saucer section to make the hologram explode. But even if it's a hologram, that means the torpedoes that they're shooting would pass through the hologram, and even if they successfully show the saucer section blowing up, it's still the real saucer section would still be hit by the torpedoes, which they do say they take some damage, but they were being shot at continuously by the bad guys when they tried to run away and eventually were caught. So how that hologram worked, that they didn't destroy the saucer section, is kind of beyond me. But okay. So then it's up to Tig and the trusty crew of cadets to save the universe. But unfortunately, the doctor starts malfunctioning, and he's saying a bunch of random bullshit. So they send Gaiden the Klingon to the medical center to fix him. Why taking a hologram to the medical center would do anything at all is beyond me, other than just get them off camera. And then Tig Notaro's character starts acting like a Starfleet officer and telling the kids what to do. She actually sounds like a Starfleet officer for the first time on this effing show. And of course, the kids all magically know how to use their positions, even though nowhere during the other 9 episodes have they ever done anything to learn how to run a ship. But and the other thing is, when the saucer section is fleeing and getting pounded by these other ships, apparently they've never heard of phasers or quantum torpedoes or photon torpedoes, because the saucer section doesn't apparently doesn't have any of those, because it doesn't use them. It just tries to run, which again makes no sense. They raise the shields, the forward shields, and even though everybody's behind them, so raising the forward shields don't necessarily make a lot of sense because people are behind you, not in front of you. But anyways, forget that. That's one of the few things that don't really make a lot of sense. But yeah, so as the students try to fix things, the sparkle puking guy, he pushes the impulse engines above what Tig said, and it causes them to go into a black hole. But there's lots of encouragement and all this kind of stuff, and supportive words from Tig for once to the kids, and yeah, it's just sickening. But anyways, they decide that what the doctor, when he's spouting all his gibberish, Sam I Am actually goes down there because now she calls him Dad. But she's concerned and she's freaking out, so they send Eyebrows down. But when Tig goes down to repair the warp engines, she gives command to Eyebrows, who, the whole show they were saying that she was great and she should be on the commander's track, and she sits down in the chair, and the first thing she says is, I gotta pee, which I guess they felt was a hilarious joke, but it was just kind of stupid, to be honest with you. But she goes down to the medical center and as well and gives control of the bridge with no one there but I guess the Betazoid. She's there, so she's trying to track down the frequency that the bad guy surely is using to control the mines or detonate them. Caleb is supposed to come up with a means by which they can take control of the signal that the Paul Giamatti must have to trigger them without letting him know because he might trigger it before they're ready. When they go down to the medical center, the doctor's spouting gibberish, but some they all suddenly understand. Well, even though nobody really understands what he's saying, he's just saying a bunch of words. They get it. They understand that he's talking about some weird molecule that can be used actually to make these, the aluminum. I was trying to do Marvin the Martian. The the mine structure, the atoms that whatever, but apparently it'll make them stable so they won't explode. So they have to figure that out. So Sam I Am is going to magically create an algorithm because that's a big word, and that's going to stabilize all the molecules so that even though their plan is to find the frequency that Paul Giamatti is using, which would stop them from exploding at least until somebody with a brain does the rest of this shit. And how the doctor magically knew what was needed to stabilize the minefield, the atoms in the minefield, is beyond me because he's a freaking doctor, not a scientist. But, anyways, the show never makes sense half the time, anyways. But Paul Giamatti's big idea, and this is where it gets like the amount of talking and stuff. Like besides all the stuff that Tig Notaro's doing, bucking up her kitties on the saucer section, then we get into Paul Giamatti holding a trial, putting the Federation on trial. Well, Q already did that, and he did it much better in Next Generation. But anyways, so he spends a lot of time in this episode talking, telling this story about his being on some mining planet, and the Federation never helped his family, and his father created a weapon to try to get their attention, and it misfired, and then the Federation killed everybody on the planet. And they have Caleb's mother there as the judge. So, because apparently she's pissed off still at Barefoot Contessa, Holly Hunter, who's going to represent the Federation and be put on trial. And it's just talk, 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 talk. The ultimate thing is they're declared guilty, and Paul Giamatti is all happy with that. And then the Barefoot Contessa basically brings up the fact that they mined they were miners, Paul Giamatti's family that died. They were miners. They were mining a particular chemical, and it just so happened to be extremely dangerous that in certain conditions it can explode, and that is what killed off his family, Giamatti's family, not the Federation, because the Federation wouldn't at that time wouldn't have the ability to actually attack a planet or some stupid shit thing. And Caleb goes from the saucer section, which is supposed to be hiding, but he goes and gets a shuttle, and he appears to speak on the Federation's behalf and tells his mom how wonderful and happy he's been in the Federation. And so, anyways, after everybody finds out that Federation, all the spectators, so it's being broadcast apparently to the universe around the bad guy's headquarters, and they're supposed to cause all these planets to join together in a anti-Federation federation. But when they find out that the death of Paul Giamatti's family was caused by his own father, then they all just magically disappear. And right at that time, the Sam I Am finishes with their algorithm and stabilizes the atoms that will explode. So they're not a danger anymore, and that allows the Federation to come and save the day, and just just so little of it makes sense. So little of it is good storytelling. Oh, Caleb and the Betazoid chick patch up, and he tells her he loves her, and she uses him to bridge to his mother to find out where the Barefoot Contessa and the mother are being held. Of course, she can do that, and so they can go with the saucer section, which they go hide out in a gas, in the rings around a gas giant, and that's when they work on their big plan to neutralize this atomic element or whatever it is. Oh God, it was just long and too much talking, too boring. Not really a satisfying conclusion to the show. And there's too goddamn much hugging in this show. Everybody was hugging each other and stuff. It's like there's no hugging in Starfleet. It's just, oh God. But anyways, apparently they all graduated. So it must be Starfleet must be the shortest bloody course you'd ever do. I mean, when I went to school, it took 4 years to graduate, not one. But Caleb's gonna stay. His mother suddenly is happy with the Federation. Don't ask why. Um, Caleb's gonna stay because he's got all these new friends, and they're all gonna have a big hug. And Sam's gonna stay because she's got all these new friends, and blah 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 blah. So that's it. The show is over for the first season. Like I said, I just hope there isn't a second because it's very poorly written, very poorly acted. The only really thing that I like about it is the look of the show. The show is the sets and stuff. They spent a lot of money on them, and it's good. Most of the CGI is pretty good, except for Starfleet. The ships they use in Starfleet are just ugly and stupid looking, and everything. They have a bunch of them that have these floating nacelles that they promoted on Discovery, which makes absolutely no goddamn sense to have the nacelles not attached to the ship. They use some kind of field to keep them to actually push the ship. It's just garbage, garbage, garbage. But uh, yeah, that's it for the first season. Save your brain cells. I wouldn't waste my time watching this show because it is pretty poor, very poor Star Trek, and not a particular even just what it's really meant to be, which is sort of a high school drama thing is not particularly good. The acting is not particularly good. There's so many plot holes, so many things that make zero sense, and they just ignore any kind of history or canon that the other Starfleet properties have built up. Like they totally destroy Klingons just because they want to. Oh, and of course, there's always, the usual amount of diversity and all that stuff because you have to have Tignataro walking around holding hands with the Jemadar female, which is impossible because Jemadars were hatched and they were all made male, so they couldn't reproduce. But magically, this fat chick is a Jemadar slash Klingon hybrid. So explain to me how the frack that happened. I'm sure they have some kind of excuse, but it doesn't make sense. So, you know, yeah, that's it. What I liked about the show is just the look. The Academy itself is pretty good, the way they did the sets. Um, their wardrobe and stuff is typical. Wasn't particularly good, but they weren't bad either. I mean, Discovery, the uniforms in Discovery were freaking horrific. They should, whoever was in costume design should have been fired. But the cast wasn't particularly good or compelling. I mean, half the time I can't remember the characters' names. I care so little about them. The people in the background, the other students are forgettable. They had a whole thing where they were sort of competing against the military academy, and that magically disappears. Nothing happens after a certain point. And yeah, it's just, yeah, yeah. Anyways, that's it. And here's hoping there's no season two.